from Statistics Canada show Canadian exports to the United States are nearing the lowest ever. Exports to other countries, though, have reached record highs.
What we're seeing in the numbers is somewhat encouraging. I mean, that, exporters.
In just 6 weeks, America's farmers woke up to a reality they never saw coming. Over $9 billion in agricultural orders vanished as 5 of the United States' biggest trading partners quietly turned their backs, shifting their business to a country once seen as just a quiet neighbor, Canada. This isn't just a trade statistic or a headline to scroll past. It's about your grocery bill, your job, and the food that lands on your table. It's about why soybeans are piling up in Kansas while Canadian containers are docking in Rotterdam. Why Iowa's corn prices have collapsed while Alberta's farmers are running their harvesters late into the night to keep up with new demand. And it's about a question that should make every American pause. If even our closest allies are turning away, who is still standing with America? Today, we are breaking down how the United States, once the breadbasket of the world, is now losing its place at the table, and how Canada is quietly taking the lead in a global food shift that is already reshaping supply chains, farm economies, and the stability we once took for granted. Because this isn't just about trade, it's about the future of America's farmers, and it's happening right now. No one expected it to happen this way. When America's largest agricultural partners turned away, it wasn't emerging economies or unstable regions. It was 5 of the United States' closest allies, the remaining G7 nations: Japan, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Italy. These nations had been reliable customers, ordering over $74 billion in American agricultural goods in 2023 alone, nearly a quarter of the industry's value. Their demand for American soybeans, beef, corn, and dairy had kept Midwest farms alive and entire communities working. But as political tensions and policy shifts continued in Washington, these allies started quietly shifting their orders north. At the G7 summit in 2025, while cameras focused on climate and defense talks, the real conversations were happening behind closed doors. Canada's Prime Minister met with European and Japanese leaders discussing food that was becoming more expensive, fragile, and caught in America's domestic conflicts. By June, Canada's food exports to G7 members had jumped nearly 20%, with Japan increasing orders for Canadian beef and wheat, while Germany and France signed multi-year dairy and grain contracts. The United Kingdom shifted 40% of its soybean imports from American farms in Iowa and Illinois to Canadian farms in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Meanwhile, corn prices in Iowa sank to their lowest levels in nearly a decade, and soybean stockpiles in Kansas grew so large that local governments had to subsidize storage. It wasn't just a dip in numbers. It was a slow-motion crisis reshaping the Midwest, revealing that stability and trust can matter more than decades of history when the world decides where to buy its food. For decades, Mexico wasn't just a customer for American farmers. It was a lifeline. In 2024 alone, the United States exported over $31 billion in agricultural goods to Mexico, making it America's largest agricultural market. Corn from Iowa, beef from Texas, soybeans from Nebraska. These shipments crossed the southern border daily, feeding both nations and supporting thousands of American farm families. But by 2025, that relationship began to crack. It started quietly. Longer customs wait times, sudden pauses in major contracts, and negotiations delayed without explanation. Then, America's tightening border policies and stepped-up immigration enforcement created ripple effects that slowed down the entire logistics chain. Factories in Southern California saw fewer workers show up. Shipments were delayed at checkpoints. Mexico saw the writing on the wall. Its food supply was at risk if it remained tied to American unpredictability. In the background, Canada moved quickly. Trade delegations quietly visited Mexico City, discussing stable, unconditional supply chains. By June, Canada and Mexico signed a $5 billion agricultural deal, shifting Mexico's soybean, frozen meat, wheat, and dairy orders away from the United States. Almost overnight, Canadian containers began arriving in Veracruz while American shipments sat in warehouses, stuck without a delivery date. In the second quarter of 2025, American agricultural exports to Mexico dropped 18%, while Canada's exports surged 16%, the highest increase in a decade. For American farmers, it wasn't just the loss of a customer. It felt like being abandoned by a neighbor they trusted most, leaving refrigerated trucks idle, silos full, and futures uncertain in America's heartland. For many American farmers, South Korea was seen as the market that would never walk away. In 2024, the United States exported over $7.8 billion worth of agricultural products there, supplying high-quality soybeans, corn, pork, and beef to a market willing to pay extra for American standards and safety. Many Midwest farms even tailored their production specifically for South Korean buyers, confident that loyalty and quality would keep orders coming. But by 2025, that confidence began to erode, not because of the farmers, but because of America's policy and stability. New trade disputes and sudden tariff proposals from Washington forced South Korea to consider the risk of disruption. A 90-day contingency plan for possible delays in American exports was activated, and a quiet shift in strategy began. Canada stepped in at precisely the right moment. Without drama or headlines, Canadian trade delegations presented South Korea with what it wanted most: reliability. By June, South Korea and Canada had signed over $560 million in grain, dairy, and frozen meat contracts, securing stable supplies until 2029. Supermarkets in Seoul began prioritizing the Product of Canada label, while American shipments faced declining demand. In just the second quarter of 2025, Canadian agricultural exports to South Korea jumped 14%, while American exports fell sharply, costing over $1.2 billion in lost market share. Midwest warehouses fell silent, and farmers who had invested in South Korean standards watched contracts slip away, realizing that in today's trade environment, quality alone isn't enough. Stability and trust now determine who feeds the world. For decades, if American farmers wanted to reach Europe, they had one clear route: the port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. Millions of tons of soybeans, corn, beef, and pork moved from the Midwest down the Mississippi to New Orleans, then across the Atlantic to Rotterdam, Europe's largest logistics hub. From there, American goods spread across Western Europe, keeping farms in Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri alive and optimistic. But in early 2025, that gateway began to close, and few in the U.S. saw it coming. Rotterdam's imports of American agricultural goods dropped 25%, while Canadian imports surged 22%. It wasn't a political statement by the Netherlands, it was a business decision. Rotterdam prioritized suppliers with consistent delivery, fewer customs delays, and stable policies. Criteria Canada met with precision. The consequences rippled back across the Atlantic. Storage facilities in the Midwest overflowed with soybeans and corn, as shipments were delayed or canceled. Barges along the Mississippi reduced trips. Trucking companies saw orders drop by nearly 40%, and processing plants in Illinois and Missouri scaled back operations, forcing workers into unpaid leave. Communities that once thrived on European exports felt a heavy silence. Meanwhile, Canada was prepared. Shipments from Halifax and Vancouver to Rotterdam rose 19% in the second quarter, supported by expanded cold storage networks and clear trade agreements under CETA. For American farmers, it became clear. While the U.S. had quality products, Canada had the routes, reliability, and readiness the world needed. And in global trade, timing and trust can be worth more than decades of tradition. Indonesia might seem distant to most Americans, but for Midwest farmers, it once represented hope, a gateway into Southeast Asia's fast-growing markets. In 2024, the United States exported over $4.2 billion in agricultural goods to Indonesia, with soybeans, corn, beef, and powdered milk forming the backbone of these shipments. Many farms even adjusted to meet halal standards, preparing for what they believed was a long-term partnership. But as political instability and trade policy shifts continued in Washington, Indonesia quietly looked elsewhere. At an economic forum in Bali, Canada and Indonesia signed a long-term agreement extending to 2030, covering cold storage, priority shipping routes, and consistent agricultural supply. Canada wasn't just offering food, it was offering reliability. By the second quarter of 2025, American agricultural exports to Indonesia dropped by nearly $700 million, while Canada's exports to Indonesia surged by 23% within just 3 months. This wasn't only about Indonesia. It was about the entire ASEAN region recalculating its supply chains. For American farmers, the loss cuts deeper because it wasn't just the end of a current relationship. It was the loss of a future. Processing facilities sit idle, grain piles up with nowhere to go, and seasonal loans become harder to secure as banks grow cautious. Meanwhile, Canada is turning Indonesia into a distribution hub for the entire ASEAN region, building infrastructure and trust that the US now struggles to match. It's a reminder that in global trade, opportunities don't wait. When trust in policy is shaken, even the most promising markets will quietly slip away, taking with them futures that farmers spent years building. In less than 6 months, America has watched 5 of its largest agricultural partners, Japan, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Mexico, South Korea, the Netherlands, and Indonesia, quietly shift their trust in billions of dollars in food orders to Canada. This isn't just a trade headline. It's a turning point that is reshaping the future of American farming. Across the Midwest, silos are filling up while trucks sit idle. Processing plants reduce shifts, and small towns dependent on agriculture feel the heavy silence of uncertainty. Farmers who invested in quality, compliance, and hard work now face the harsh reality that in today's world, quality alone isn't enough. Stability, clear policy, and reliable logistics have become the currency of global trade. Canada didn't win these markets with noise. It won them with preparation, consistency, and trust. As American farmers continue to plant, harvest, and hope, they are not the problem. The problem lies in the policies and instability that have driven away partners once considered unshakable. It's time for America to reflect, to rebuild trust with the world, not just through products, but through clear, stable policies that reassure partners we are ready to stand with them long term. Because in this new era, the world will not wait for America to catch up. And if we don't act now, the opportunities quietly slipping away may never return.